You know, there's something deeply tragic about watching a prince, a man born into unimaginable privilege, who walked behind his mother's coffin at 12 years old, who served his country in Afghanistan, standing in a courtroom while people he once called friends take the stand against him. This isn't a Netflix drama. This isn't another chapter in The Crown. This is real life, and it's messy, it's painful, and it raises questions we all need to ask. When does seeking justice become an obsession? When does righteous anger turn into something else entirely? And what happens when the bridges you burn are the ones you might desperately need to cross back over? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell because we're diving deep into the royal stories that matter, the ones that reveal something profound about human nature, power, and the price of speaking your truth. Today we're talking about Prince Harry's legal battles, the courtroom testimony that shocked royal watchers around the world, and what it all means for a man who seems to be fighting everyone, including perhaps himself. Let's get into it. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind a bit. Prince Harry hasn't just filed one lawsuit. We're talking about multiple legal cases against British tabloids, media organizations, and even institutions he believes wronged him, Meghan, and their family. On the surface, his mission seems noble enough, holding the press accountable for phone hacking, illegal information gathering, and the kind of intrusive journalism that he believes contributed to his mother's death and has made his own life unbearable. And look, nobody's going to argue that the British tabloid press is innocent. They're not. The phone hacking scandal that erupted years ago proved that some journalists and private investigators broke the law, invaded privacy, and destroyed lives to get stories. Prince Harry has every right to be angry about that. His mother, Princess Diana, was literally chased to her death by paparazzi. That trauma doesn't just disappear, but here's where things get complicated. Harry's legal battles have become all-consuming. We're not talking about one carefully chosen case to set a precedent. We're talking about what some observers have called a crusade against the British media establishment. And crusades by their very nature require you to be absolutely certain you're on the right side, to see everything in black and white, heroes and villains, us versus them. Now, in these various legal proceedings, something extraordinary has happened. People from Harry's past, friends, former staff members, people who were once in his inner circle, have been called to testify, and their testimony hasn't exactly supported Harry's version of events. Let's be clear about what this means. These aren't tabloid journalists taking the stand. These aren't palace enemies or people with an axe to grind. These are individuals who knew Harry personally, who worked with him, who socialized with him, who were part of his life before Meghan, before the exit from the royal family, before everything changed. One particularly striking example came from testimony about Harry's time in the military and his early adult years. Former friends described a Harry who was actually quite savvy about the media, who understood how the game was played, who even courted certain journalists when it suited him. This contradicts the narrative Harry has presented of himself as a perpetual victim who never understood or engaged with the press strategically. Another witness, a former member of his staff, testified about how information was shared with the media, suggesting that some of the stories Harry claims were obtained illegally might have actually come from authorized briefings or legitimate sources. Imagine being Harry in that moment, sitting in the courtroom, hearing someone you once trusted essentially saying, "That's not quite how it happened." And this is where we get to what court observers and legal commentators have called Harry's meltdown. Now, we should be careful with that word. It's dramatic, it's clickable, but what does it actually mean? From various reports and accounts, what seems to have happened is that Harry became visibly emotional, frustrated, and at times combative when faced with testimony that contradicted his claims. In one instance, when presented with evidence suggesting he might have been aware of certain media practices or had consented to certain types of coverage, Harry reportedly became agitated, insisting that documents were being misinterpreted, that context was being ignored, that the whole system was designed to make him look bad. Here's the thing, and this is important. Emotional reactions in court aren't necessarily signs of guilt or weakness. Courtrooms are high-pressure environments. When you're facing cross-examination, when lawyers are picking apart your statements, when people you once trusted are saying things that contradict your truth, it's human to react emotionally, but it's also revealing, because what we're seeing is a man who has built his entire recent identity around a specific narrative that he and Meghan are victims of a corrupt, racist, intrusive media system and an unsupportive royal family. That narrative has been the foundation of their Netflix deal, Harry's memoir, Spare, their interviews, their whole public persona since leaving royal life. When friends testify in ways that complicate that narrative, it doesn't just challenge Harry's legal case. It challenges his sense of self, his understanding of his own story, the way he's made sense of his life. Let's talk about these friends for a moment. Who are they, and why would they testify against Harry? That phrasing, against him, is itself revealing, isn't it? Because technically, they're not testifying against Harry personally. They're testifying in legal cases, answering questions under oath, providing their recollections and evidence. But from Harry's perspective, it must feel like betrayal. These are people who attended his parties, who were there during his wild youth, who knew him before he was the Duke of Sussex, before he was Meghan's husband, when he was just Harry, the party prince, the soldier, the younger brother living in William's shadow. Some of these individuals have testified about specific incidents. For example, there was testimony about a story that appeared in the press about Harry's drug use in his youth. Harry claimed this information was obtained illegally. A former friend testified that Harry had actually discussed this openly in social settings, suggesting the information might have reached journalists through normal gossip rather than phone hacking. Another area of testimony involved Harry's relationships and dating life. Again, Harry has claimed that intimate details about his romantic life could only have been obtained through illegal means. Former friends have testified that Harry was actually quite open about his relationships within his social circle, and that in London's upper-class social scene, such information inevitably spreads. What's fascinating and painful about this is the question it raises: is Harry's memory of events genuinely different from what others remember? Has his trauma around the media legitimately distorted his recollection? Or is there a more calculated element here where the narrative of victimhood has become so central that contradictory evidence must be dismissed? Let's dig into the psychology for a moment, because this is where it gets really interesting. Prince Harry has been open about his mental health struggles, his therapy, his processing of generational trauma. That openness is admirable and has helped destigmatize mental health issues, particularly for men. But there's a concept in psychology called confirmatory bias, the tendency to interpret all new evidence as confirmation of our existing beliefs. If Harry truly believes that the media has been illegally targeting him his entire life, then every story, every intrusion, every camera flash becomes evidence of that conspiracy. When friends testify that some information was shared openly or obtained legitimately, it doesn't fit that framework. And when information doesn't fit our framework, we have two choices: adjust our framework or reject the information. Harry seems to be choosing the latter. There's also the trauma factor. Harry witnessed his mother's harassment by the media and then her death. That's not something you just get over. No matter how much therapy you do, that trauma likely means that any media attention feels threatening, invasive, dangerous, even when it might be routine coverage that any public figure would experience. Trauma can make us see patterns where there might not be patterns, threats where there might not be threats, enemies where there might just be people doing their jobs or even trying to help. Here's something else we need to consider: Harry's increasing isolation. When he was a working royal, he had an entire support system: advisors, press secretaries, private secretaries, family members who could provide perspective, who could say, actually, that story came from an authorized briefing, or we agreed to that coverage. Since leaving royal life and moving to California, that support system has largely disappeared. By most accounts, Harry is now primarily relying on Meghan, his lawyers, and a small circle of advisors. When your circle gets that small, it's easy for groupthink to set in, for your version of reality to go unchallenged. The friends testifying against him represent the world he left behind. They're reminders of a time before everything became so complicated, before every relationship had to be viewed through the lens of loyalty tests, before every interaction became potential evidence in a legal case. There's a bigger question lurking underneath all of this. What is Harry actually trying to achieve? If we take him at his word, he wants accountability, justice, and to prevent other people from experiencing what he experienced. Those are noble goals, but at what cost? He's estranged from most of his family. His relationship with his brother, once so close, is reportedly non-existent. Friends are testifying against him in court. His reputation in Britain has plummeted. His legal bills must be astronomical. And for what? Even if Harry wins every single lawsuit, even if he extracts apologies and compensation from every media outlet, will it heal the underlying wound? Will it bring back his mother? Will it undo the trauma? Will it make him feel safe, loved, understood? There's a concept of winning the battle but losing the war. Harry might be so focused on being proven right in court that he's losing sight of what actually matters. Relationships, peace of mind, a stable life for his children, the ability to move forward rather than constantly litigating the past. From a public relations standpoint, this is a disaster. Remember, Harry and Meghan have positioned themselves as victims of media harassment and royal family dysfunction. Their brand, such as it is, depends on public sympathy and support. But watching Harry in court, hearing testimony from friends that contradicts his claims, seeing what looks like an obsessive legal crusade, it's changing the narrative. Instead of the sympathetic figure who walked away from royal life to protect his family, Harry is increasingly being portrayed as someone who can't let go, who's burning bridges, who's so consumed by grievances that he's alienating everyone around him. Fair or not, perception matters. And the perception is shifting from poor Harry, hounded by the press, to Harry needs to move on and get some perspective. This matters because Harry and Meghan's post-royal life depends on maintaining public interest and support. Their Netflix deal, speaking engagements, Meghan's various business ventures, all of this requires them to be sympathetic figures. If that sympathy erodes, if the public starts seeing Harry as bitter and difficult rather than brave and principled, their entire post-royal strategy collapses. It's worth considering the alternative path Harry could have taken. Imagine if, after leaving royal life, Harry had said something like, "I've had complicated experiences with the media. Some coverage was unfair, but I'm choosing to move forward, focus on my family and my charitable work, and not dwell on the past." That would have been powerful. It would have shown maturity, growth, resilience. It would have been the ultimate revenge, actually. Living well, thriving. Proving that he didn't need the institution or the British media to be happy and fulfilled. Instead, Harry chose litigation, confrontation, and what looks from the outside like an inability to move on. Whether that's fair or not, whether his grievances are legitimate or not, the result is the same. He's trapped in the past, endlessly relitigating old wounds, while life moves on around him. Let's come back to the friends testifying against him, because this is perhaps the most heartbreaking element. What must it be like to sit in a courtroom and testify about someone you once called a friend? These aren't people who woke up wanting to hurt Harry. They're people who were subpoenaed, who had to answer questions under oath, who had to tell the truth as they remember it. But from Harry's perspective, it must feel like ultimate betrayal. In his worldview, if you're not with him, you're against him. If you don't support his version of events completely, you're part of the problem, part of the system that's trying to destroy him. This black and white thinking is understandable given his trauma, but it's also destructive. Life is complicated. People can care about you and still remember events differently. They can wish you well and still have a different perspective on what happened. The tragedy is that Harry is forcing people to choose his truth or their truth, loyalty to him or loyalty to their own recollections and integrity. That's not a choice friends should have to make. So where does this leave us? Harry's legal cases are ongoing. There will be more testimony, more cross-examination, more opportunities for contradictions and meltdowns. The question is whether Harry can step back, gain some perspective, and consider whether this crusade is actually serving him and his family. There's still time for Harry to change course. He could settle some of these cases, focus on the work he claims to care about, mental health advocacy, supporting veterans, environmental causes. He could rebuild relationships, or at least stop actively destroying the ones that remain, but that would require admitting that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't have all the answers, that his version of events isn't the complete truth, that some of his grievances, while real, might be less clear-cut than he's claimed. That's a hard thing to do when you've invested so much, emotionally, financially, publicly, in a particular narrative. It's especially hard when that narrative has become your identity, your brand, your raison d'etre. Here's what we can all learn from Harry's situation. Whether we're royal or not, holding on to grievances, no matter how legitimate, will eventually poison your life. Seeking justice is one thing, becoming consumed by it is another, and surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you, who never challenge your version of reality, is a recipe for isolation and delusion. Harry's story is a cautionary tale about what happens when trauma meets privilege, meets grievance, meets publicity. It's a reminder that being right and being happy are not the same thing, that winning in court and winning at life are very different achievements. Look, I don't know Prince Harry personally, none of us do really, no matter how many interviews we watch or books we read, but from everything we can observe, we're watching a man in crisis, a man who's lost his way, who's fighting battles that can't be won in courtrooms, who's alienating the very people who might help him find peace. The friends testifying against him aren't villains. They're people telling their truth, just as Harry is trying to tell his. The tragedy is that Harry can't see that multiple truths can coexist, that the world is more complex than victims and villains, that sometimes the enemy isn't out there but within ourselves. In our inability to forgive, to let go, to move forward, I hope Harry finds peace. I hope he realizes before it's too late that being vindicated in court is no substitute for having people who love you, trust you, and stand by you. I hope he can step back from the legal battles long enough to ask himself, is this really what I want my life to be about? Because right now, he's winning legal arguments but losing everything else. And that's the real meltdown. Not the emotional moments in court, but the slow motion collapse of a life that could have been so different, so much better. What do you think? Is Harry justified in his legal crusade, or has he gone too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this analysis valuable, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. Share this video with anyone who's following the Harry and Meghan saga. Let's get a conversation going. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.